My friend needs to fix that spelling in caffeine. But welcome to Talking Time with Caffeine.
Hey everyone.
Hey.
We have a little echo problem right now, but we'll fix that later, I guess.
Yeah, technical difficulties.
But today, we are going to introduce you people to how we record music in the studio here.
Yep. So we use a software platform called Studio One. And it's loading right now.
Now, if you think recording music in the studio is easy, it's not. So Brad, tell us your first when you first used this software. Was it hard to use, or did you learn a lot of stuff to use it?
Well, considering when I started like 20 years ago, it's 1,000 times more better workability and stream. We gotta find out where that echoes come from.
Probably because the mic's right here. Maybe the mics right next to each other.
Your hound. Here, let's try that.
I think that might be one of the things they're recording in the same room.
Yeah.
By the way, hi.
Hi.
See my arm?
Yeah, see my hands? Yeah. It sure is taking a while to start. Usually it doesn't take a while.
Probably because you had two things going on at once.
Yeah, that would make sense. So in the South Studio, we have Studio One Professional.
What do we have here?
Apparently, since we're using the audio box to record live, it can't work on Studio One at the same time.
Whoopsie.
Yeah. So I think we're going to close out Studio One.
So how did you first find Studio One?
I have been recording music for years, and it was a major upgrade from going real tape and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's the difference between going live music and recording in the studio?
Live music is all about selling beer and getting people excited and not letting people sit still. A studio is a very sterile environment.
Mm-hmm.
When you're live, you're not worried about spiking the meter. When you're in a studio, spiking the meter is everything.
Yeah. I remember a few months ago we recording Brian's drums. You had to make sure the red to go with the red line.
Right. Yeah. You want to stay around 0 decibels as well.
Yep.
So anybody have any questions for Brad about recording studio music? So what can you do in Studio One? Like what different things is there are? So we can't. I wanted to show it, but we can't show it really.
Well, right now the piece of hardware that we use to record in Studio One, we're also using to record this live stream.
Yeah.
It's not capable to do two things at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're running it for Studio One, it's pretty amazing. What it does is it takes an analog signal and turns it into a digital signal. Then with that, you can edit everything in real time. So it's really the way to go. It gives you more control, thereby obtaining better results with less work.
Okay. So did you find it by accident, or did somebody tell you about it?
No, I bought an interface a number of years ago, and that's what got me hooked on. I've released over 15 albums using TTwC. So I'm very familiar with it, and I love it.
All right. What are the steps in doing it? Like, you record things separately or all together, or what?
Generally, you want to get a good, clean recording. So you don't want to spike the level meters. So if you can record it clean and set everything at the same volume and then do some gain stages, you end up with a really good quality recording where you can hear everything and no signal is bleeding into the other signal.
Okay.
So VendettaRecords.com is the website of the record label and musicians co-op that I run here in the Dayton area. I have my own home studio. I have the professional version of Studio One. It totally kicks butt. I can do everything from basic audio editing all the way into full-on mastering. Basically, I can take any music, any ideas, and transform it if I take enough time, and turn it into a radio-ready song. And that's what I like about Studio One. Years ago, when I was growing up, if you wanted to open up a music studio, you spent $500,000. And that's because you had to buy hardware. Studio One is software. So the software is 100 times cheaper than buying hardware, and the software mimics what the hardware does.
So you ever been in a real studio before?
Absolutely. On the album I recorded a number of years ago with one of my other bands, TU144, we recorded a track called Atlas on His Knees professionally at Rephrase Studios in Kettering. I will tell you, it took me 8 hours to get all the vocals down, to get the piano laid, the bass laid, the guitar laid. It was a great time. I got to sing in a $4,000 Neiman mic, which I'll never get to do again. But I will tell you, it's when I started realizing that I could do the same stuff from my home and get the same quality at a quarter of the price. That's when I got invested in Studio One.
Well, if you wanted to give us a new mic and stuff, you can always go to our Amazon list and buy stuff on the list for us. You're working stuff. Wink, wink, wink. Nudge, nudge.
Yeah, any donations would be appreciated, because anything we get, we're just going to reinvest into our studio. That way we don't have like technical difficulties and reverb on everything I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But we appreciate all your support. I'm going to supply Lamont with a lot more bands coming up. I'm in negotiations with them right now as we speak, as a matter of fact.
So how long does it take to record a record, one song from like beginning to end?
I mean, it really depends on how many takes it takes you to get the sound the way you want the sound. If you're very well practiced, and if you know the song well enough, and if you play it the first time through and you like it, that's great. Sometimes you have to do 100 takes before you get it right. And that's where it costs time. That's where it takes labor. I mean, you want to get good emotion when you play. You want to change the mood in the song and the tempo and the feel. But you also don't want to drive those meters real high trying to do that. Because if you do that, you're going to have a crappy recording, and all those signals are going to bleed into your other signals, and your mix is going to come out sounding very muddy and mushy.
So you're saying it's better to do it right before you go into editing mode?
Absolutely. It's better to add effects, do it dry, and add effects afterwards, because you get a lot more control that way.
What's the hardest thing to record? Drums, guitar, vocals, keyboard?
Well, I can tell you honestly, in a professional studio such as Rephrase, they've spent roughly $250,000 to be able to record proper drums. I mean, drum miking is a science.
Yeah.
The guys that are really good, the audio engineers that are really good at it, spend a lot of money, and it's not necessarily on like the drums, but on getting the sound right, getting good microphones, good mic preamps, doing it, right, the right sound, mic placement. And I mean, you can spend hours just doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my studio, Killer Bee Studios in Xenia, what I actually use is I have an electronic drum kit. It's called an Alesis Nitro, and I spent about $500 on it. But the reason why I like it is even though it doesn't feel quite like a regular drum set, the sounds, it uses samples. Samples are recorded actual drum hits. So when you play the Nitro in demo, it's like playing a real drum set. Nobody can tell the difference. And the thing is, I also use MIDI in Studio One. MIDI stands for musical instrument digital interface. So what MIDI is anytime you hit one of the drum heads on the Nitro kit, it records a note. It records the velocity. It records the tempo. It records how fast you hit it, how hard you hit it. And then what it does is it makes the drum sound in real time sound like you're hitting it that hard. So it gives you unlimited customization. So you can take these MIDI notes and literally change the drum around. You can say, I want the snare to be louder, or I want the snare to sound more like this. And all you have to do is swap samples out until you get your drum set to sound the way you want it. And then you individualize those tracks, and you can separate the MIDI notes onto their own individual tracks one at a time. And what Studio One does is once you drag the MIDI track from an instrument track into an audio track, it then takes that MIDI note with the corresponding drum hits and turns that into an individual drum track. So it turns into a wave file. So you can take every single wave file, apply compression and reverb and dynamics. And what that does for you is it gives you total control over the drum set. It's a lot better than an acoustic drum set where you're drumming in the mic. When you're drumming in the mic, if you get the mic placement wrong on one recording and you're playing a whole drum set, then you got to redo the whole recording.
Right.
On this, you get one thing wrong, big deal. We'll just adjust it and keep going.
Right. Yeah.
So it gives you unlimited ability to change stuff. It just takes time to do. But as far as like with the digital technology, it also costs a lot less to record.
Yeah.
Years ago, I know studios such as Rephrase, they charge like $60 an hour with an engineer to record. So basically, you have to get the show up there, set up your drums, set up your piano, set up your everything, and you record. And it is $60 an hour, $1 a minute, the minute they hit that record.
So you better make sure you got it right the first time.
Oh, you sound check it. You got to and that's the whole thing. So what I'm in the process of doing, like we do a lot with my buddy Eric over and my other buddy Brian, we are in the process of actually building 2 different recording studios. One here in Vandalia, and then obviously my home studio is Xenia. And what we're going to do is we're going to open this up, invitation only, to some local talent. And we're going to help them record demos and help them record albums. And with your streaming platform, you'll interview them and play their songs that we recorded. And it's going to be a one-stop shop to promote local music. And those same guys that we promote can also be guests on your show. So it's a very good thing. And we're also working on trying to secure a corporate sponsor to help offset some of the physical cost of opening the studio and getting that done. But again, it's not exactly cheap. Yeah. But it's not $100,000 like it was 20 years ago.
That's true. So, is there a limit to how many instruments or vocals you have in Studio One? Or is it
Unlimited amount of tracks.
Okay.
But the thing you gotta realize is the more tracks you add, the more muddy the mix gets. So that's where gain staging comes in. That's where you reduce the gain on the signal. You have a good signal, but you cut the gain back. That way you just hear everything and it comes out a lot clearer and channels aren't bleeding into the other channels. So it just takes time to set that up.
So I said earlier, you record anything like you record vocals first or vocals last, drums first?
All depends on how I'm doing the song. Some songs start off with like an a cappella, so it's all vocal. So what I'll do maybe I would have, for example, like I sing the vocals to a click track. That way I know I'm in time. And then from there, we would erase the click track so you wouldn't hear it.
All right.
Yeah. Sometimes I get real lucky and like I'll have my buddy Brian Kirky come over to my house. And I'll play my rhythm guitar at the same time he's playing the electronic kit over at my house. So we get drums and guitar and they're perfectly synced. And then all I gotta do is lay some vocals and some lead guitar and we're done. So it just depends.
So far you only have. Do you have any other instruments? Do you have keyboards ready to go yet, or?
I've got keyboards here. We got guitars ready to go here. We're going to eventually get a nitro kit at this studio, so we'll be able to do drums as well. We have full vocal editing so far. It just takes time. It's a building progress. The way we do this is we buy it one piece at a time, build it one piece at a time, and take our sweet time. You can't rush into this.
Yeah.
We're going to do it, I'll spend $100,000. Go ahead and do that. And the thing that you're going to be overlooking is how to make quality recordings.
Yeah.
So, it's not always about having, especially new producers. We get a lot of new producers in the area, and all they want to talk about is plugins, and my plugin does this, and my VST does that. And in all actuality, really good producers, the guys that are getting clean mixes, don't use hardly any of those. They might have like 6 or 7 go-to plugins, and it's because they know how to record right and end up with a great record every time.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of like guitar. You can try and self-teach yourself. You might be okay, but it's actually better to take lessons or take a tutorial, because if you do that, you learn the right way to do it, the right order to go about doing it. I'm very happy because I am Studio One certified. I'm Studio One professional. I took a course on Udemy, got my certification certificate. I'm planning on getting Lamont his Studio One certificate. Eric over here is Studio One certificate. And Brian Kirky, also known as Brian SRB, our BDP studio drummer, Brian Kirky. We're going to get him his Studio One certification too, so that way you'll always have someone available who can run Studio One who's licensed and who has the background and knows how to do it.
So how hard is it to get Studio One certified?
I wouldn't really say it's hard. It's like there's online courses you can take. You watch a lot of videos. You answer questions. You got to get them all right. Once you get them all right, you pass the course and you move on, and you have a certificate they email you that you can print out. So it's kind of how we do it. But I actually take a course from a guy called Gary Heidner on the app called Udemy, and that's who runs the Studio One course. He goes over everything. He's a professional audio engineer, makes a living out of it, and he does a great job, and I couldn't be happier. And there's a lot of Facebook groups tied up to his Udemy and everything else, so it's very easy to communicate with other producers and get going.
Okay. So, what was the hardest part of going from live music to studio music for you?
Live music, again, it's all about feel. It's about, you go out there, you play with emotion, and you try to have a lot of energy. And you're more worried about being dramatic than you're really worried about being accurate. I mean, you can make it when you learn to play live, you can make a mistake, but a good live musician, let's say you break your string, you have a backup guitar. You grab a guitar strap on and keep going. Mm-hmm. When you're recording, you can't do that. When you're recording, it's all about accuracy. It's about getting clean recordings. So if you want the recording to have the same intensity in the studio as it does live, you just have to take the time and do it the right way. And it's not a quick process. It takes hours.
Also, probably not worry about the people in the studio writing and music is bad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
So, what was it like your first time recording in the studio?
The first time I went to rephrase, oh boy, that was kind of scary actually, because you're in there and it's like, oh my god. And it took me 8 hours. I was lucky I had a cousin who paid for me to go, but 8 hours to do one song.
So how much was that back then? Like
$60 an hour, so it was like $500, $600. And it was really cool, but it was also it was hard. Studio is totally different than playing live. You can play live and put on a great performance. But here's the problem. When you get in the studio, it's all about accuracy. So when you're used to playing live, you're used to playing with the drummer. That drummer doesn't necessarily have to play in time. You can play one song live somewhere and be at 120 beats, and then when you go play somewhere else, you'd be at 110. Nobody would know the difference because the song sounds the same. It's got the same energy. When you get into a studio, it's got to be the exact same tempo, and you play with a click track to make sure you're in the exact same time. Because if you're not the exact same time, or if you miss a beat, you'll throw the entire song off. So that's why you got to be practiced and you got to be disciplined. Studio is all about discipline. It's totally different than playing live. Live has discipline, but studio is even harder.
So, like, basically, you're saying unless you have a lot of money, you're gonna get it right the first few times you can.
Well, it's not necessarily a lot of money, but if you're going to do it, you better have your stuff practiced. Don't come in here like what not to do. If you're new to a studio and you've never recorded before, what you don't want to do is go talk to the audio engineer and say, I need more low end on my bass. These toms aren't high enough. You know, you start arguing with an audio engineer like that, he'll say, sure, I'll be more than happy to work on those settings for an additional $25 an hour. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. Again, the minute they hit the record button, your time is counted. So if you book 8 hours of studio time and you spend 2 hours arguing with your audio engineer, you now have 6 hours to do your 8 hours worth of recording. Mm-hmm. So that's the whole point.
So you've been on both ends of the thing. You've been on the recording end and the editing and the producing end, right?
Oh, I've been on, yeah, oh yeah. And I played live too, so I know all about it. And what I'm telling you, there are no shortcuts. People that go into music and they're like, oh, I'm going to talk to a drum machine, that's really not that hard to do. But actually producing, like play guitar and sing, stay in time and stay in tempo and make it sound as good as your live recordings, that's hard. Mm-hmm. That takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of audio editing. It's not a quick fix. You can't take a mastered song and say, oh, I want it to sound like it's super, because by then everything's been mixed out. So the trick is you want to get a good mix and get the mix dialed in perfect before you ever master.
So what's the minimum computer space and RAM needed for a Studio One that you know of?
You want to run at a minimum 16 gigabytes of RAM. If you could do probably a couple of terabyte hard drives, that would not be a bad idea. The computer in TTwC Studios, we're running a 32 gigs of RAM, and we've got 4 1 terabyte hard drives to support all the plugins and everything we have. So it's a lot faster than this computer, but I mean it's kind of a Frankenstein computer. So
I would say you want about a quad-core computer with about 32 gigs of RAM. Yeah. These days, it's pretty easy.
You don't need a video card.
No.
That's the thing. Kids today, they're like, oh, I want a gaming computer. What they don't realize is my desktop, even though it doesn't have the $1,000 video card, will outperform their computer 3-1, and I paid half as much for it.
Right. Yeah.
What you need is RAM to run programs, a processor that can handle high amount of RAM, and you need space so you can save all those files. Mm-hmm. If you have all that, you're great on studio.
Right. So do you have like a hard drive for each song or each record?
I have one hard drive that I dedicate just to recordings that I'm doing, like actual MIDI files and wave files and all that. That's for that. That's where all the Studio One songs go. I have another hard drive that I have my iTunes collection on, which is stupidly ridiculous. I've got another hard drive that I actually installed the Studio One operating system and all the VSTs on, so it always comes from that same drive. So that way I'm not bogging down the C drive on the computer. And then I have another one for miscellaneous, like photos and videos, stuff like that. Mm-hmm.
Alright. So once everything's done, your vocals are perfect, your instruments are perfect, you know, they're all lined up with each other. How do you like upload and boost the song when you're done with it?
Well, typically there's a couple of things. So when you record in the studio, the first thing you do is they mix the song. So mixing is everyone records all their tracks. And what they do then is after they get everything recorded on separate tracks, they then edit each individual track. Is the snare drum snappy enough? Is the bass drum punchy enough? Are the toms too loud? Are the cymbals too loud? Stuff like this. The guitar good enough? Does it need to be layered to be thicker? Vocals, what a lot of people don't notice, and this is true, 99% of recorded music that's on the radio, if you hear reverb in someone's voice, it's not reverb. It is that person singing on a separate track, singing over top of themselves. Michael Jackson, when he recorded Thriller, recorded over 100 vocal tracks. But when he goes, that's how he did that. That was 100 vocal tracks, friends. It's not easy work.
Right.
Queen, when they did Bohemian Rhapsody back in the 70s, they didn't have the technology or enough tracks to do Bohemian Rhapsody. So the piano part played by Freddie Mercury was recorded in a separate studio. The vocals were recorded in a separate studio, and Brian May's guitar was recorded in a separate studio. Then they took 3 tapes, played them all into one machine to get that song. So, I mean, we're talking about major hard editing here. The people that are good at doing studio work, studio musicians a lot of times are much better than live musicians. Live musicians are about doing live, but a studio musician can play in any key, anytime. They can change the sound around. They know what they're doing, and they don't get frustrated. Live's about selling gear. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference. Studio is a totally different environment. It's much more sterile. It's about accuracy. About accuracy and control. If you have accuracy and control in the studio and you got your songs well rehearsed, you can get it knocked out pretty quick. Yeah. If you're not good at it and you haven't practiced, well, then it's a totally different thing.
Mm-hmm. So Brett, hey, like my new living room.
Oh, I love it. That new grand piano you got is phenomenal, Lamont.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was donated by one of my fans.
Yeah, well, that's good. You got to save your money there, buddy.
Why don't you tell them the differences between setting up an analog recording versus Studio One and the differences in the environment?
Sure.
Anechoic chambers.
So analog was years ago. Analog was like mic straight to tape. So it would record your voice, it would go to a tape deck, and it would record on a tape. Analog is okay. The downside to analog is you had to play it right the first time. Because if you didn't play it right the first time, you had to delete it completely and start all over again. Mm-hmm. And it was the same thing as Studio One. I mean, it worked the same, but the difference was you didn't have as much control. So if you recorded 10 bad tracks, that was 10 bad tracks you had to completely redo, start from square one and redo. Mm-hmm. Digital, you can get 1 or 2 bad tracks, but you can edit stuff out. That's why it's quicker. Mm-hmm. And the other difference between analog and digital, when you recorded in an analog studio, you had racks and racks of analog equipment to do what you wanted it to do. And some of this equipment, a single equalizer could cost $30,000. A single mic preamp could cost $20,000. Mm-hmm. And you had to put all this in there, and the cost of buying analog equipment versus buying digital that uses plugins and software was astronomical. You spent $1 million to open up a small studio.
Yeah, we started out with the reel-to-reel and mini disc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said it's mostly software, but is there a hardware to it? Is there hardware to at all?
Studio One, I mean, yeah, you do have hardware. You have what's called an interface. And an interface is what you would plug like a guitar or a microphone in. So an interface, you can plug a mic in. That's what I'm talking through now. What the interface does is it takes your analog signal and turns it into a digital wave file, just like the same kind of file you'd see on an electrical oscilloscope. Mm-hmm. So when you get into Studio One, you can take that digital file, you can shrink it at the end so it fades in and fades out. Mm-hmm. You can take the middle of it and make it real fast so it explodes and blasts. But that's kind of what's cool about that. It gives you a lot more control that you just didn't have back in the analog days. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The analog days, it was a lot more about having sheer guts, good talent, and good accuracy. You had to have all three. Nowadays, it's more like, if you can give it an effort, you can probably pull something off.
So could you do like a voice dubbing, voice acting on Studio One?
You can do all that. You can do all that. Studio One's great for vocals. On a lot of the songs I do 3 or 4 or 5 vocal tracks just for my main vocal. That doesn't include if I'm doing backup vocals. If I'm doing backup vocals, I might add 3 or 4 more tracks in either side, left or right to do that. And then if I have someone else sing with me, we both might sing on the mic at the same time and do 5 or 6 tracks of that. When I did this song, Atlas on His Knees, when I did that at Rephrase Studios, the chorus was really big. But what I'm going to tell you, and a lot of people don't realize, is it was 4 people. Each person of those 4 people did 6 vocal tracks. So we had 24 tracks just in vocal for the vocal and the chorus. And that's what made that song sound so huge and stereo and like Hollywood.
Right, yeah. It's still about the quality.
Yeah.
Even though you get all the effects, it's still about the quality.
So Eric, what do you do in this group, studio group? What's your role in this?
I'm the technology guy. I set up the computers and networks and all electronics and get it all set up for them, make sure things are running. If they got a problem here to fix it, do that sort of stuff.
And we're going to work with him to actually work on some audio engineering as well. We want him to be fluent in Studio One. That way, if I take a vacation, we can cover it.
Right.
That's the idea.
You can't see it right now, but we set up some soundproof foam on the opposite side of our webcam. So
yeah, we're well on our way to getting her done. It just takes time. This is actually coming together a lot quicker than I thought it was going to come together. So I'm pretty happy so far, and it's getting better every time. But it just takes patience. Rome wasn't built in a day. The way we're doing this is we get old furniture and repurpose it. It works fine.
It was built in 2 days, Miss King. Oh. So, what's the okay? Oh, what's the hardest part of record? No, I said that. You said vocals. Do you record them at the same time? You record each vocal track separately.
I usually do each vocal track separately. I'll get one good vocal in time. And then what you do, and the reason why you record each track separately is, let's say on that first track, maybe there's a part of the song where your voice came in too low, right? So when you do that second track where you're low, your voice might be higher, right? So the higher pitch will cancel out the lower pitch, and it'll sound like one vocal with a little bit of reverb. So if you get enough vocals in there and tighten them up then real tight, it gives it a really big, full sound, and that's why you layer. That's called layering, and you do that all the time.
And is that just for one person, or is that for like you have separate singers, like 3 or 4 singers?
You can do it for anybody. Axl Rose, famous for layering crowds of vocals. Freddie Mercury layered vocals. Pretty much anybody that is on a recording contract or major recording artist layers vocals. And if they have really big choruses, I'll give you a good example. 30 Seconds to Mars. Those guys, I think they did like 200 vocal tracks for that This Is War track. And I mean, it's absolutely insane how many vocal tracks and crowd recordings they overdub to make it sound as thick as it does. So it's a lot of work. It's not something you throw together in one day.
Where do you see it going?
I eventually see this, if we can start small, help some local bands, help promote them and get somewhere. You know, we're going to do a lot, probably for not that much at first, but eventually we'll be able to hopefully make some money doing this. And if we're really lucky and if we pursue it enough, you know, maybe we can quit our job someday. I don't know if I can actually do that yet, because this is literally like square one, and there's 10,000 squares to go, but we're on our way.
All right. So as an editor, if you invite a band to come here or your studio, the South Studio to record, what will the process be of doing this?
Well, there are a couple of things we like to figure out. And actually, Lamont, I know you have a banner for my website. You want to plug for our website, bandanarecordsdayton.com. If you want to scroll that across the bottom, The reason why I'm going to advise that you guys check that out is we have a contact form on that very website. And if you fill out the contact form, it asks you a lot of pertinent questions. Are you ready to take the next steps in your musical career? Have you ever recorded professionally before? It asks for all of your social media tags, stuff like this. It's all information. That is all very pertinent. One thing is our studio is kind of at a non-disclosed location, both of them, and we're not going to publicly give away the location of our studio for security reasons. I don't want someone coming over here and ripping off $15,000 worth of equipment. So what I will say is once we get to know bands, and we'll go out to the bars and see the bands and interview them and see if they're good people and talk to them a little bit, meet them somewhere neutral. And if we like it, we'll bring them in to record them. But what they're going to understand is we're doing it the right way. There is no shortcut way to do it. When you come into a studio to record, the first thing that you do is your ego gets checked at the door. You have a big ego. You have a big ego. It gets in the way of recording. So we can't have a drummer come in here and say, I need more high end and argue with the audio engineer again for 3 hours. Because if you do that, your 8 hours of studio time, you just wasted 3 hours.
Yeah.
So it's really more about people actually being understanding. We're not going to invite anyone in here. It's going to be people that are good people. We don't want to invite Joe Schmo that has a serious drinking problem.
Yeah, you damage stuff, you buy it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not something we're rushing into. We're taking our time with this, but we have a hell of a start. I couldn't be happier.
All right, sweet. So, question. Think. So, okay, once you have a band in here, you bring them in there. As soon as you get recorded, it's music time. You're on the clock.
So basically what we're going to do is we're going to have a recording agreement. The first thing I'm going to say is at Vendetta Records and in our entire co-op and everything, number one, I'm going to look right at the camera here because you need to understand this. Number one, we do not ever want anyone's copyrights or anything to do with that. What we do, we are here to help you record your music and publish it, stream it, and promote it. That's what we're going to do. But as far as recording in the studio, we will work out a recording contract. You will pay this much will get recorded. This is and everything will be put out in writing. We're not doing it to be difficult. It's that we're doing it because you need to have clear expectations, just like we need to have clear expectations. It's so that everyone is on the same page when we start this project. Recording takes time. It is a discipline. And you can't just come in here, never recorded in the studio before, and act like over the place. Because the minute you do that, we're going to jack your rate up.
I just get a message from Brian. He says he's on his way down to Florida. He wants to say hi to everybody.
Oh, cool. Well, Mr. Perky, you have a wonderful time in Sunshine State. We'll see when we get back.
Yeah. Yeah, by the way, promoting is that's kind of my side of the thing here. I'll use this podcast here to introduce you to the world if you're not known yet, and my audience, people's audiences, connections. You go from there.
Yep. So this is all about, hey, if there's anybody watching this, if there's local talent, local bands that would want to work with us, maybe if they have like a practice space where they rehearse from, and if they can set up a webcam here, they can always stream on this show, and they can be a musical guest. We're not against that. We would love to have that. We're all about local music. If you're from the Dayton, Ohio area, Cincinnati, or Columbus, we'd love to work with you. We're all about doing this. We're a grassroots roots rock and roll movement, and we're here to help you out.
And we also have connections to a radio app, Ohms. That was it.
Oh, so there's Ohms Radio. They actually have their own wiki page. Ohms Music is based out of Northern Ohio, And what they do is they actually have a brick and mortar record store. But the thing that's really cool about Owens is the only records that you will find in their store is music that's been recorded by local artists, people from Ohio. They also have a streaming radio station, and they offer a full list of resources too for local musicians to build a portfolio and get their name out there.
So anything else you need to talk about Studio One?
No, I think we're pretty good. When I get an opportunity, next time I'm on your show, if I'm broadcasting from the South Studio, I can probably show you Studio One. We'll at least attempt it.
Yeah, because less of an echo problem we have right now, being in the same room.
Yeah, exactly. There's just a lot of feedback here. We'll get it fixed. It takes time. This is brand new. It just takes time to get the audio right. We're working on it. But once we're there, it'll be great. It's not too far off.
Awesome. All right, so you have catchphrases in your recordings?
Vendetta record. Nate rock great again.
Nice. And never stop learning and do the randomness. Next week, I'll have Side Up on my channel. We'll talk some science stuff. Side Up.
If you're interested in being a musical guest on the Launch channel, go to VendetteRecords.com, fill out the contact form, and let us know that you want to be on one of these shows. We would love to have musical guests. It doesn't cost anything.
We'll see you then.
Bye.